want to kick off with the president's visit to the GCC last week. There was a lot of noise about the economic deals, the deal making and so forth that went on, but then equally there were several diplomatic breakthroughs, and we'll talk about Syria and the announcement on Syria. But before that, in your own words, how would you articulate what the Trump administration wants to achieve in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you on behalf of President Trump and Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the Middle East. I'm very lucky and blessed to work for the both of them. Certainly grateful to Qatar for having me here and Bloomberg. I will confess, I do watch Bloomberg. As she knows, it's my go-to. I mean, it's the best place to get news. Pardon to the other TV cameras in the room. But I have to start off by saying, on behalf of the American people, how grateful we were to the Emir and to everybody in Qatar for giving our president such a gracious welcome and visit last week. Steve Witkoff, my boss, was here with the president, and it was just amazing, not only as a Trump administration official, but as an American, to see the images and the videos and the warm welcome we received. And I think it's indicative of the partnership that the United States has, not only with Qatar, but with the Gulf countries and the GCC writ large. You know, to answer your question, I think we have to step back just a little bit and think about how every administration views their foreign policy and views how the president views his role in the world. One of the things that we thought worked really well for us in Trump 1, in the president's first term, is that we looked at the Middle East and we said, you know, what we're going to do is to reward our friends and allies and work with them, and to punish our enemies. That seems like maybe a very simple statement, but we felt that there was an inverse from the second term of the Obama administration in the JCPOA, where we felt like Iran and its proxies were very much strengthened at the expense of our friends and allies. That's something, a dynamic that we sought to reverse in Trump 1. And I think because we reversed it, it's how we got to Abraham Accords. Speed up to, we have a 4-year break, and then Trump 2. And of course, we inherited some of the worst wars that we've seen in a very long time, in decades. We have the worst war on European soil since World War II. And obviously, we had hot wars and things in the Middle East. We had Americans that were still held hostage. So the first 100 days or so of this administration, we have sought to replicate that model that we did in Trump 1, where we work the Middle East, all of the issues you just talked about, Syria, Gaza, Lebanon, whatever it is, we're working these issues incredibly closely with Qatar, with Saudi, with UAE, so that we're moving and working in concert together. And I think the framing of how we view the Middle East from a strategic perspective, that we make all of these decisions with our close partners and friends, especially states like Qatar that house so many American troops. For us, that guides our foreign policy here in the region. Yeah. Of course, the president's trip was very focused on the economic and trade and business relationship between our two countries. It's incredibly important, obviously, to him and to the American people. And I think that so many people have misunderstood what an America First foreign policy means. Clearly, President Trump is guided by what he thinks is best for the American people. And in that vein, working with Qatar on economic development and investment is a win for both countries, and certainly a win for the American people, and that's what President Trump is looking for.
I just want to ask about Gaza specifically, because I spoke to His Excellency the Qatari Prime Minister in the morning, and he expressed a little bit of frustration vis-a-vis how those talks are going and progress towards a ceasefire. But then the U.S. hostage envoy Adam Bolo was saying overnight that there has been progress. So can you just give us an update on what the U.S. are trying to do to get a ceasefire agreed to?
This issue is incredibly important to the president and very personal to Steve Witkoff. The president in his first term was able to get more American hostages home than any president in modern history, and he has sought to get every American home. Last week was so monumental. You know, it's very, I'm not really a crier, but Steve had been working so diligently, even before President Trump was sworn in order to get all of the hostages home. And of course, to finally get Idon Alexander, our remaining American who was still alive, out of Gaza was huge for us, monumental. Steve has told this story many times, but he actually lost his youngest son, I think a little over a decade ago. And I know that it is his life's work and mission to help these families get their sons and daughters back. And this has been a very high priority for the president and for Steve. And so that was a big success for us last week. And we couldn't, by the way, as Steve has said many times, we couldn't get this done without the prime minister here in Qatar, who he works so closely with, without Qatar mediating. So we're very grateful. And we still have more hostages to get home. Listen, the president has made it clear, as you've seen his statements over the past week, that he wanted to get more food and humanitarian aid into Gaza. And we actually, on Steve's team, we've been working closely with the Israelis on a new mechanism that would get aid directly to Gazans and not to Hamas. And so we've helped to facilitate that. I think what you said about the prime minister saying he was frustrated about where talks are, I mean, we certainly understand that because there's more hostages to get home and there's an ongoing war. And, you have had a terrorist group that held their people hostage, that committed some of the worst atrocities that we've seen on October 7th, and that continue to use innocent people as human shields. That's a frustrating dynamic for us. However, on the positive side, I think when we speak to the Gulf countries, the foreign ministers in Jordan and Egypt and everyone, there is a consensus starting to develop on the way forward. We all know that Hamas cannot govern Gaza. We all know, and the president has said this many times, that he wants a better life for those people, that he sees Gaza as a place that could have a bright future. It doesn't have to be stuck in where it is. So this is not something that's going to be easy by any means, but we're going to work diligently until we get every hostage home.
And a very delicate situation right now with the ground operations being expanded. Yeah. I want to talk about another major announcement last week. President Trump announced that the U.S. is looking to lift sanctions on Syria, and also met face-to-face with the Syrian president, Ahmed al-Shara. Was that a surprise to the administration? Can you give us more color around the thought process that went into that announcement, and also how quickly we can expect some of those sanctions to be lifted?
Well, I've been lucky enough to work for President Trump twice. So having worked for him in his first term, nothing surprises me anymore. But they're normally good surprises, as was the case here. I mean, listen, I think we have a very realistic view of what's going on in Syria. And with Shada. And when we came in, it was, weeks before our presidency. It was obviously a surprise to a lot of people that Assad finally fell. And you have to approach this with a healthy dose of skepticism. I do not yet know if Shada has had a conversion on the road to Damascus. We shall see. What I do know is that the president has heard loud and clear from Qatar and Saudi and UAE that he prefers that we start engaging. The way it works in our system is some sanctions can be lifted by the State Department, some have to be lifted by Congress. So as people who execute the president's foreign policy, we're working diligently to make sure that happens, his announcement. But of course, we also, through Secretary Rubio, who really leads this file for the president, he's personally dealing with Syria, he's made it very clear in all of his announcements that there's a lot of things that matter to us. Crucially, protection of minorities. So the Kurds who fought with us, the Druze, the Alawis, the Christians, women, you go through it, expelling foreign fighters, from the country. It's a little challenging to ask, the minority communities who are very vulnerable to disarm until the foreign fighters that fought with Shada have disarmed. So he certainly has a challenge, but I know Secretary Rubio and President Trump want to engage cautiously. No one is, to use an American phrase, no one's sort of Pollyanna about this situation, but we see an opportunity to work on two key interests of the United States in Syria, and that is making sure Iran doesn't come back and doesn't have a foothold there, and also making sure ISIS doesn't come back and have a foothold to have plots again against Europe and the United States. So those are really our two key interests there.
And you've spent a lot of time on the Lebanon file as well. Do you think that the Lebanese government is making enough progress on disarming Hezbollah?
Yes and no. I would say that they have done more in the past 6 months than they probably have in 15 years. However, two things can be true at the same time. Yes, they've done a lot in the past 6 months of the presidency of Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam. However, there's a lot more to go. I mean, I think it was just a month ago that missiles were in downtown Beirut, and you see that the Emiratis have, of course, lifted their prohibition on their citizens being able to go to Beirut. I'm sure that no country in the Gulf wants to send their citizens to a place, you know, Beirut and Lebanon is relatively small, so you don't want to send your citizens there if there's like ballistic missiles around the corner from the coffee shop, right? That's not really tenable. So we in the United States have called for the full disarmament of Hezbollah. And so that doesn't mean just south of Litani, that means in the whole country. And what I hope is that the leadership, and not just, I mean, I've become very good friends with President Aoun, and I think he's doing a great job. The Prime Minister as well, Navi Berri, the Speaker of the Parliament, for all of them, for the whole leadership, the Parliament, they have to make a decision. They're at a fork in the road. And that fork in the road is you can continue to go down the road, down the path of being a vassal state of Iran if you want to. You can have a terrorist group in Hezbollah that's a state within a state that has weapons, but look at the death and destruction and war that brings you. You know, we saw how the movie ended in 2006. We saw how the movie ended in 2004. And if Hezbollah retains their missiles and rockets and maintains their arms, it is a matter of when, not if, that they draw the Lebanese people back into a war that they don't want to go into. But we, through the United States, Qatar, UAE, Saudi, we are offering a different vision, a different hope for Lebanon. And that vision for Lebanon, I think, is best for the Lebanese people. It brings investment. You know, I've told them constantly, you know this as a Bloomberg reporter, as a business reporter, I don't want Lebanon to be a donor state. Right? It's kind of pathetic. For Lebanon, this amazing country, I want them to be an investable state. I want the private sector there. I want all of you in this room not to look at Lebanon as this pathetic country that you have to donate money to, but I want you to see it as the bright, shining star of the Middle East that it used to be, and even better, and a place that you want to invest. And that's our goal and our hope. But it starts principally with disarming Hezbollah.
What about on the economic side of things? There are a certain number of economic reforms that need to be passed in order to unlock an IMF package. Do you have faith that Lebanese lawmakers are going to get there?
I do. I would say that they have made a lot of progress in the past few months. They passed the Bank Secrecy Act. They passed judicial reform. Now they need to tackle the bank law and the gap law and bank resolution. And I encourage the Parliament to take this seriously, to take this aggressively. It's important because after the banking collapse, the cash-based economy that exists in Lebanon is a beacon, is the best thing for Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations, and just money laundering and corruption, right? One feeds off the other. And so you don't want a cash-based society that you have now. We have to get faith and restoration back into the banking sector that comes with the reforms that you just talked about. If we're going to end endemic corruption in Lebanon and the reign of terror of Hezbollah, if we're going to end all of these things, we have to get faith back in the banking sector, and that's why these reforms that you discussed are so crucial. By the way, the IMF's not the only way. It's one option. I have a grand plan and vision where Lebanon may not even need the IMF, right? If we can turn them into an investable nation, I can use all of you as investors in this room, and let's not saddle the country with more debt.
Morgan, I want to round up with a question about potential normalization, because there are reports that secret talks are being held between Syrian officials and Israeli officials in Kazakhstan, if you want to comment on that. But I do wonder if Syria being brought into the fold has accelerated the timeline, you think, of a country like Lebanon also beginning discussions around normalization.
So let me start with President Trump's first term and say, obviously, Abraham Accords is our policy. When we look at Israel, we look at regional integration, peace. I hate using the word normalization because I don't think anybody really knows what that means, right? The American people. What are we looking for? We're looking for neighbors to be at peace with each other. to do business with each other, to have embassies, to have people, to have young people in Tel Aviv, go to countries that they've never been to before, and vice versa for spring break, right? We're looking, what we're hoping for, what we worked for in Trump 1 and what we work for in Trump 2 is that my kids and your kids and little Israeli kids and Emirati kids and Qatari children and you name it in the Middle East, that all of these children read about the stories of violence in the Middle East, and it's something that they read about in the history books, but is not something that they live. Now, I absolutely understand that that sounds very pie in the sky right now, but nobody would have believed us a year before Abraham Accords happened that we would have been able to get there. And so we will pursue that policy. We clearly understand, and we'll pursue that policy throughout the region. We clearly understand that there needs to be resolution in Gaza. We understand that October 7th changed the Middle East for Israelis and for Arabs, for everybody. We know this is why the terrorists did it. The Biden administration was reportedly 2 weeks away from a normalization peace agreement between Saudi and Israel. And think about how different the world would have been if that had gone forward. But Iran got what it wanted, and it used a terrorist group to disrupt and to disrupt peace in the Middle East. And so we are facing generational, enormous challenges. But I will say that if you're going to get peace with more states, if you're going to integrate Israel into the broader Middle East, there's no time to do it like under President Trump, because I think he's a visionary, once-in-a-generation leader that got it done in his first term. And I don't know when we'll get it done in a second term, but I'm a big believer that we will.
Morgan, thank you so much.
Thank
Morgan
you.
Ortagus, everybody.